Hey folks, you know I take my trail camera intel pretty seriously. It's a huge part of how I build my hunting strategy, and I'm always looking for gear that just flat out works. Stuff I can rely on. Backed by solid people and the best customer support in the business. That's exactly why I run Tacticam Reveal cell cameras. Whether you're just getting started or you're a full-blown data junkie like me, they've got a camera to fit your budget and your hunting style. My go-to currently is the Reveal 3.0 series with fully integrated GPS. These things are dead simple to set up. Less fiddling, more scouting and hunting. And they run on most major service providers and will automatically connect you to the strongest signal in your area. So no more hiking to the top of a ridge just to realize you've got the wrong service provider. Been there, not fun. Here's the kicker. You don't even need an SD card. That means fewer trips in, less pressure on your spots, and more real-time intel sent straight to your phone. And if you pair it with a Reveal solar panel or a lithium cartridge, you can keep those cameras running longer and spend more time doing what actually matters. Scouting new ground, dialing in a setup, or maybe, just maybe, finally cleaning the garage like you told your wife you would before the season started. Don't just take my word for it. Check out Tacticam Reveal at tacticam.com. Tacticam. Everything you need to take your hunting to the next level. Stay more comfortable, more concealed, and in the stand longer with Oscio gear. Premium camouflage apparel created for bow hunters by bow hunters. Oscio's revolutionary patented camo patterns and innovative features are designed to keep whitetail bow hunters totally invisible and dead quiet. Elevate your game with Oscio. Visit asiogear.com and take 20% off your purchase with code TRUTH20. You know, when it comes to mobile hunting, weight and efficiency matter. And that's why for years I've trusted Tethered, the industry leader in saddle hunting gear. Like always, this year they've taken it up a notch with their new Whitetail frame pack and the hybrid or the minimalist bino harness. And if you're looking for their most comfortable saddle they've ever built, meet the all-new Carnivore 2P. If you're like me and spend long hours in-season scouting, hiking miles, and pulling those all-day sits, you got to check out Tethered's gear. I spent over 30 days this October and November chasing a particular buck. Long hikes, long sits. And Tethered system kept me dialed in. My kit, the Ultralock saddle, 1-Sticks, Predator CFX platform, and the Fast Pack. If you're serious about staying mobile and staying quiet and hunting smarter, check out everything they've got at tethered.com. Tethered, made for saddle hunters by saddle hunters. Welcome to the Truths from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast, brought to you by Tacticam Reveal Cellular Cameras. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 440. Today I'm joined by my buddy Brian Dombrowski to talk the behavior and patterns of mature bucks. So stay tuned. All right. What is up, everyone? Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you're doing well. Hope you are feeling fine. Hope you had a good Mother's Day. Spent some time with your mamas, with your wives, taking care of them. Because let's be honest here, they are truly the straw that stirs the drink. And I can speak for myself that I wouldn't be able to do even a quarter of the things that I'm able to do if it wasn't for my wife being as awesome as she is. And as supportive as she is, and let me do all the stuff that I like to do. So shout out to the moms out there, probably all 2 or 3 of you that actually listen to this podcast. So more speaking to you fellas. But with that, we're just going to go ahead and jump into today's show. Nothing too crazy to kind of to jump into as far as like my personal adventures this week. Nothing really took place. You know, had a lot of family stuff going on. So this next weekend is the weekend, fingers crossed, as long as the weather holds out, and it's going to be good. I should be able to get out and get some stuff done, and looking forward to that. But with that, we'll jump into today's show. I have my buddy Brian Dombrowski on. Dombrowski, struggling with saying his last name for some reason, but he's a fellow from Wisconsin, great hunter, has put a lot of really good bucks down, and you'll see if you're watching the video, you'll see his wall kind of behind him. And he is just one of those guys that I forget where I learned of, and we talked about this a little bit. I forget exactly who turned me on to him. But the thing that kind of really struck me about him is just how much, all of us who are really into whitetail hunting, we spend a pretty significant time, in the woods, and it ebbs and it flows at different, points in your life where you have more time or less time or whatever the case is to be out there. But Brian is truly a student of the timber.
and just his ability to kind of, break down an area. When he knows a buck is in an area, he really just needs an observation, be it from a trail camera or be it from on the hoof from the stand or from, glass in or whatever the case is. And once he knows that deer is there, it's just a matter of time until that deer's days are numbered. I did ask him at one point, like, if you know a deer's in an area, like how much time do you need? Like for me, for example, I like to have, if I'm going to chase a specific deer, which as you guys know, I don't do a whole lot, but did last year. Yeah, I like to have like a couple years of intel on a deer. I just don't feel real confident with my, the amount of time I have to get out typically in a season and stuff like that I can hunt a specific deer and only have learned of him that year. That's just not something I feel real confident being able to do. Brian, on the other hand, he just needs to know a deer is in an area, and he'll be able to hunt that deer down. And so we talk a little bit about that. And then inversely, we talk about a deer that kind of has been one of those deer that we've all probably have encountered that has been a thorn in his side for a couple years, where he's chased the same deer for 4 years. And it's given him the okey doke, a couple different times, and just always seems to be slightly, out of range, or just kind of gives him the slip. And so we talk a little bit about that. And like he says, fingers crossed that deer isn't alive this year, so it's not there to haunt him anymore. But super cool conversation. Really enjoyed having Brian on. Look forward to having him on again as we get later into the season and so forth. So with that, we'll go ahead and jump into today's show. As always, thank you all for listening. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And today I have one man. I usually ask how to pronounce people's last names, but I didn't ask you. I'm going to take a flyer on this one. I'm going to say Brian Dombrowski.
That's pretty good.
That's pretty good?
We'll take it, yeah.
We'll take it. Awesome, man. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. Just enjoying the beautiful weather we got right now. So
how about it, man? I was just in Denver this past weekend, or probably when this comes out, like the weekend prior, for a concert with my wife, a little anniversary getaway, and the weather was freaking awesome. It was like 70 degrees every day, bluebird skies every day. But the one thing I forgot about, and I mean, you don't have this in Wisconsin necessarily, but I forgot how, like with the elevation change, I forgot how much more UV you get. So 65 or 70, like I'm assuming like in Wisconsin and PA, like 65, it's still like, oh man, it's a little chilly out, especially if you got like a wind. You got a little humidity, can make it a little cooler, like a little damp, Out there, obviously no humidity, and you're at elevation. It's like 65 degrees out, and I'm like, had pants on because I was like, oh, it's going to be cool, Dude, we were hiking by like the first like 10th of a mile. I've got my shirt off, like just like sweat. It was so hot, but like it has been beautiful, man. It's like it's been good for getting out with the bow and doing some shooting with it with this weather. It kind of gets me chomping at the bit a little bit. Definitely,
yeah. It's just starting to green up here now, pretty good. So
yeah,
we got to switch gears.
Yeah, you chasing some birds right now?
No.
I
went turkey hunting once about 12 years ago. And I shot a Jake, and I never really cared. It just never really struck me. Well,
you and I are, no pun intended, are birds of a feather in that way.
Yeah,
because turkey. I get excited. I haven't gone this year. Like it just opened the weekend that I was out of town in Pennsylvania, and I didn't get to go out because I was away. And then this weekend coming up, I won't get to go out because my daughter's prom is this weekend. And I have my mom and my stepdad coming into town to take pictures and be with her for like her junior prom and stuff like that. So I've got some family stuff, but I don't get all broke up about it. Like if I can get out for turkey season, like it's just like an added bonus. And I usually like hunt for a couple hours in the morning, and then I just scout or try to see if I can pick up a shed somewhere or whatever. And that's really what it kind of turns into for me. And I'm the world's worst turkey hunter. Like I can't call. I'm not patient enough. You know what I mean? It's like, it's all the things. I probably move too much, like all those things that you can't do. But yeah, you and I are the same, where it's like, it just never struck me.
No, I'm always got that scouting for whitetails. I'd rather be doing that than sitting there waiting for a turkey.
Yeah. I'm the same way. By the looks of your wall, like the scouting's paid off, but it looks behind you.
We're doing okay. Okay. I think we're
nice. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I said our rooms are filling up, so yeah, we're doing okay on that.
Yeah, so let me ask you that. That's a good maybe question to start with. So how do you navigate the conversation with the wife when you want to put another mount up? Right?
So I don't think we're going to do any more mounts.
Yeah. Okay.
I might be done with mounts, honestly.
Yeah.
I'm going to probably be doing Euros. Mounts are getting really expensive anyway, almost $1,000 to get a nice mount now.
Yeah.
If I get a county record, state record, or beat Johnson's buck, I'd probably mount it.
Yeah.
Other than that, I think I'm just going to do
the Euro.
know, I'll do a Euro in my driveway. I can do that myself. And,
right. Yeah.
You know.
there you go. Yeah, because I got the deer I killed in Kansas back, and I kind of knew where I was going to put it because like the wife kind of has a standing rule. She was like, you can put whatever mounts, deer, whatever you want to do in the basement. So our basement's kind of like a cigar bar, like lounge is kind of how it's set up. Like there's a bar and it all looks like a lodge and stuff. And so she's like, you can hang whatever you want to hang downstairs. It doesn't matter. She's like, but none of it comes upstairs. And I was like, okay. But then I was like, I killed this one. I was like, it's a good one. I was like, man, I kind of want to hang this one in the living room. She's like, hard no on that.
We got them hanging over the bed in the bedroom. We got them the garage. They're everywhere. So I'm just
the bedroom would have been divorced for me. Like they would have been like, don't pass go. She'd be
I can just look up and there's one there, and it's
nice. So that's what I aspire to. Maybe one day I'll have to probably have to build myself my own tiny home in the backyard for that. Is what's probably have
there
to
you
happen. Go. Yeah. Nice, man. But before we get too far gone into this, looking forward to the conversation, and we talked a little bit about, what we wanted to cover, like when we were getting ready to start recording. But for people that don't know you or where you're from and stuff like that, just give them a little bit of background about you, what you do for a living, and where you're from, and those types of things.
So I'm from center part of Wisconsin, just below Stevens Point, Ploverberry, about a half hour. Mm-hmm. So I'm dead center of the state. Lived here my whole life. I think we're around the same age. I'm 48. It sounds like you're 47. So we're part of that last generation, that knows
before the internet and
before
cell phones.
Yeah. So we know all about that.
Yeah.
But what I do for a living is I'm a service technician for a fire and security company.
Okay.
So I get to travel to most of the state and do that.
Nice.
I've been doing that for 20-something years.
Nice.
And that kind of helps with deer hunting as far as how I look at problems.
Mm-hmm.
Because you know how an engineer looks at, you get a lot of engineers that you're talking, they overcomplicate the issue, it seems like. So I'm always looking for the simplest answer to a problem. But,
right. You remind me, like when you say that, you remind me a lot of, I don't know if you know who Greg is, but my buddy Greg Litzinger.
Yeah. I know who he is.
Yeah. Because he looks at things the same way, right? Like, because we've had those conversations, because he's in the service kind of component of what he did for work before he hurt his wrist. I imagine at some point he'll be doing something similar again. But he would say, there would be engineers that would come in and be like, oh, you need to do this, that, and then Greg would be like, we'll just do this, and it'll take half the time, and it'll fix it just as well as what you're suggesting, right? And we would always kind of talk about that, and it makes sense because, when you're thinking about killing deer, right, or trying to hunt a specific buck or whatever, and I've talked about this with, another fellow that's he hunts Wisconsin. He's not from Wisconsin presently. He's in Minnesota, but my buddy Tony Peterson, right? Yep. We always kind of joke that, man, if you want to complicate how to kill a buck, just talk to a couple of deer hunters. You know what I mean? Like we'll make it way more complicated than it needs to be, right?
Oh, definitely.
What do you think that comes from?
I just think there's so much information out there.
Do
Everyone's
you think people complicated it as much previously, like before podcasts and videos and all that stuff? Do you think people made it as complicated as it is now, or do you think that is more of a phenomenon of information?
Both. I was reading an Outdoor Life book from the 80s, and they were talking about deer hunting, and you read that book, and it talks about all the same stuff we're doing now. Scent control, camo, it's different, but it's all the same stuff they're talking about what we're doing right now. So it's nothing's really changed, but I think people want to just get cutesy with stuff, and they think there's some magic sauce out there or something,
Right. Yeah.
And it's just a lot of work.
Yeah.
I've been hunting public land now since the mid 90s, probably 96. Since then, and it's just a lot of work.
Yeah. What attracted you to the public stuff that early on, right? Because I know growing up as a kid, as you mentioned, you and I are close to the same age.
Yeah.
at least in Pennsylvania when I was a kid growing up, like it wasn't all that difficult to get access somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Like on a neighbor's farm or whatever. I grew up in rural PA, so it's like I could knock on the neighbor's door and like he would have loved nothing more than for me to come over and kill a couple deer so they weren't eating his corn or whatever it was, right?
Yep.
Now, obviously, I get not just the attraction of public, but I get the necessity of it for a lot of folks to have an opportunity to hunt. But I don't run into a lot of folks necessarily that were, hunting, public that, I don't want to say consistently, but like that, I don't want to say early on either, because like there's certainly guys like Dan and stuff like that who've been doing it for forever, but maybe not to the same scale that it happens now. So I'd just be curious, like what attracted you to it? Because I'm imagining where you're from in Wisconsin probably feels similar to Pennsylvania, heavy hunting heritage, right? A lot of farmland, rural areas, a lot of opportunity, right? Sure, there'd be plenty of farmers you could have gotten access from, during that time frame.
So in high school, we had a lease over by Pittsville. We had a 120-acre lease with 5 guys. My mom and dad divorced when I was 8. My dad really doesn't hunt. He doesn't have the patience to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So the guy she's been with since then, we had a lease over there, and we lost that lease around that time.
Mm-hmm.
So then everyone kind of disbanded.
Okay.
And I still wanted to hunt. And I was the only child or whatever. And so I just kind of went out on my own. I bought a River's Edge tree stand, which I still got, one of the portable ones. And back then they had these really crappy aluminum steps, for climbing. And you really had to watch out with those because they'd actually break on you.
Oh, jeez.
The buckle would break, so you'd always have to hold on to like multiple ones.
Right.
This was back before like waist belts and stuff.
Yeah.
So, but that's when I first started. I just started going around that area on the public, and finally shot my first doe, and ever since then I've been just scouting and just getting more and more involved in it now.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty seasoned now, after 25, 30 years,
Sure.
we're, I actually like it. I like the freedom because, let's say I don't have to worry about, timber stand improvements. I don't have to worry about food plots.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to worry about paying money for 40 acres and feeling I have to hunt that property.
Mm-hmm.
The sky's the limit. And there's so much public land out there people don't realize.
Yeah. That was the attraction for me, because I grew up, like I said, rural PA. I had a back 40 that I hunted like growing up for the most part because my dad loves to hunt, but he wasn't like well, just put it this way, he's not like me in that regard, in the way I like to hunt, right? Yep. He likes it. It's a hobby, right? Yep. It's obviously a little bit different for me, right? And I moved away for a little while, came back, moved to Florida for a little while, came back, and then family owns property back home and stuff like that. And so I started kind of just hunting like the family farm and things like that. And I couldn't kill a specific deer 2 different years because he was bedded on the neighbor, and I knew he was there, and I would catch him, coming, leaving his bed. He would cross this like little creek bottom, and he would hit this one, basically hollow. He would start to come up, and he would kind of side hill this one like ridge line or whatever, and that's where I was catching him. I had like 4 different encounters with him one late season. I was like, I'm gonna kill him next year opening day.
Yeah.
Well, he showed up opening day right where I thought he would, but behind some brush, and just didn't work out. And then from there, it's like I could never get back on him because he just wasn't like moving in daylight early enough, and I just couldn't get close enough to him, to make it happen. Long story short, a buddy of mine actually killed him on the farm during gun season, and it was that deer. That was the moment where I was like, all right. I was like, that's it. I was like, I can't. I knew where he was at. I was like, I can't. I was like, it kills me that I knew where the deer was and I couldn't go kill him, right? Yeah. I had to, because of a property line. Yeah. I was like, so I'm going to go hunt where I don't have to deal with property lines as often, and that was really kind of the reason for me to kind of make when I made the switch over, whatever that was, like 8 years ago or so. And
you have bigger, around here we're in the middle of the state here, it's a lot of patchwork of properties. Mm-hmm. There's not too many huge pieces around here.
Okay.
Like I've hunted, there's one down the road that's about 5,000 acres, but other than that, it's like maybe a few hundred.
Yeah. Where I'm at locally, there's there's a couple that are probably like in like the 1,000-acre kind of realm. A lot of them around here are like probably more in like the 500-acre, 150 acres here, you know, stuff like that. And then, you know, when you start to head up north, northern PA, whether you're on the west side of the state or whether you're on the east side of the state, you'll get into some larger, like if you're on the west side of the state, you start getting into like the Alleghenies and stuff like that, which is, you know, a lot of land. And then when you get up north here on the eastern side of the state, you know, you start to get into some like bigger country up there, up toward like the New York border and stuff like that, where you start getting tracts of lands that are like in the tens of thousands of acres, you know, to kind of stomp around on. And that's what I've been kind of exploring and playing with like the past several years, which has been a lot of fun because it's hard, it's daunting, right? It's just a lot to try to figure out, and so much that could be not good and very little that is really good, you know. And in a lot of places for them to be to bed, you know, and lack of consistency with that kind of stuff makes it challenging. But it's also a lot of fun because you know there's enough space there for them to hide and get age and get all the things they need to have to, you know, to be a substantial animal, you know.
Correct. Yeah, I was going to say, like around here with the age factor, that's probably one of the biggest things I'm looking for, you know, is pockets where you can find animals that can reach that age. You know, it's very hard to come by. Yeah. With that big woods like you were hunting, I was going to say, all you need is that one starting point. You know, you just need that one rub, that one sighting, and then from there, I don't know if you Mississippi State Deer Labs, they did that collared study. Yeah. And I think they radio collared a deer or a bunch of deer or whatever, and they determined the average whitetail range, you know, for a buck is like 650 acres, let's say. Yeah. It can be bigger and smaller, whatever, but once you have that starting point, you know. Yeah. Now you're in the game. You're already in the game, so now you can. Yeah.
You're in the game. So it's funny you mentioned that because that's like I've had Dr. Strickland on like a couple times to talk about like buck bedding and some of the studies they've done and stuff like that. And when I found this particular deer last year, I had an idea of where he might be, you know. Had some trail camera pictures of him for a couple of years, you know, but just like he was more consistent than I thought he was until I went back and like looked at all the intel I had on him. Then I was like, wow, man, he's more consistent than I had anticipated, you know. And he kind of changed just size wise. Like he threw me off from like one year to the next. I thought it was a different deer until I really went back and examined, and I was like, oh man, that's the same deer, you know.
Bigger or smaller? That's
bigger.
Bigger. Okay.
Yeah, it's like it just like from one year to the next, like he went from like, I don't know, just call it like 150 inches, right? Yeah. And I didn't know anything about him really, like other than 2 trail camera pictures, you know. Didn't know anything about him. So of course I didn't hunt him. And then the next year he got a little bigger. He was like 160 inches probably ish, right? Yeah.
That's a heck roughly, of a deer, yeah.
Right. And then I still didn't know much about him. And then the next year, I didn't think I had really any trail camera pictures of him, but like he kind of blew up and was like, there was a deer I had on camera that was clearly like in the 70s, you know, and I was like, oh man, that's a big deer. And then I had some pictures of him like late in the season whenever I pulled my cameras, like after the season. And that was when I realized, I was like, oh man, that's a big deer. And he's consistent. At least last year, the previous year, he was consistent. Well, then when I went back and looked at all the trail camera pictures I had, like that was the same deer. Yeah. And so it took me, and I didn't realize it because like he just, not that he changed, he just had a couple of antler characteristics that made me think it wasn't the same deer. Yep. Right. But what you're saying is like, I used that to try to narrow down where it was at because I was like, I know he's going to have about a 650 acre like area he's going to call home. I got to figure out like where he's going to spend a lot of time. So I basically like, where I had him most consistently, I made it the center, you know, and then I basically like made a mile circumference around it. Right. And I know that's more than 650 acres, but I use that as like, it has to be within here somewhere. Yeah. Right. Because I did that size because I was like, even if I'm not at the center and maybe I'm a little too far east or too far west, I've kind of like covered it all, like with that mile circumference. So I was like, I just need to check everything in here. And that's kind of how I started narrowing down where it was at.
Yeah. Then you can pattern them within that 650 just by the rubs.
Yeah.
You know, you figure out that individual buck based off his antler characteristics, and you can just follow them all around that woods.
Yeah. So, yeah. So that's interesting you say that, because that's exactly what I did.
Yeah.
He had an interesting antler characteristic, and he made when he would make a rub, he would make like a tick mark that was about 12 to 16 inches above like where the main rub was.
Gotcha.
And because one of his tines kind of turned.
Yep.
And it took me a while to find it, because I couldn't find anything from him. And I finally found that. And once I found that, then I was like, oh, but yeah, it was like I could find, like, I'd see rubs, and I was like investigating all of them. It's like, oh, he's been here, and then you start mapping that to figure out like where all he's been, right?
Yeah.
Hardest part though is how do you get in front of him, right?
Yeah.
It's like it's easy to be a day behind them. It's hard to be, 6 hours ahead of them.
And then the foliage comes into play when that's dropping, the food sources, the wind, everything just kind of comes in. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit, man. Like, when you think about finding these deer, like, and there's that 650 acres, right? And you're trying to narrow down just even that 650 acres. And then within that, right, like what hidey hole is he using, right? Because I think even some people listening, when you say 650 acres, like for people maybe like you or I, or a lot of folks who listen to this show, like that's not necessarily a lot of space for people, right, that hunt larger tracts of public land. Like Correct. It seems pretty normal. It's like, oh yeah, 650 acres. It's like a small little section, right?
Yeah.
But if you're someone who's only ever hunted like the 250 or 300 acre farm they've had, of which is probably like 100 of it's huntable, right? Correct. It's like that seems like gargantuan, right? So how do you go about starting to find the hidey holes like within those sections?
So it's like on a bigger piece of property, I'll do what you did with that national forest land. I'll begin to map his travel routes out based off his antler characteristics, sightings, something like that. It's the hardest part is understanding how I hunt a lot of marshes around here, and this would be the same in any territory. But the hardest part is how are they moving within that landscape, and then once you figure that out, everything just kind of falls into place, What I'm seeing a lot of here, let's say you got 650 acres and you only can hunt 40 acres of that, right? Because the rest of it might be on some private land, and you know, so you got to determine how much of that buck's playbook you have to go after them. The percentage, how high a percentage do you have to hunt that deer? But I'm seeing a lot of these different. I've been running into a lot of times that deer is on the transition between the public and private, because everybody on the private, what do? They just want food plots. Hardly any of them I notice are doing bedding. They want food plots. They want their stands, whatever, and all the beautiful bedding is on the crappy public. So, and there a lot of times they're bedded pretty damn tight to that edge, where you might be able to slip in there in the morning, pretty close to that property line, and just catch them coming back in where they're entering that public and bedding down maybe 150 yards onto the public. But it seems like a lot of the bigger bucks are always putting a geographic feature in between them and where they're feeding. So let's either like a grassy field, they'll cross that grassy field in the morning right before dark and then bed down, kind of look maybe with the wind coming over their back, or like a good one around here, we got a lot of little cricks, and those son of a guns, I'll find they'll just cross that creek and be bedded within earshot of that creek, so they know anything, but right. It's pretty hard. Like every deer is different. I've been, it's a new game for every deer I find. So it's,
right. Yeah, that's interesting. Like there's two things that you said right there that rang true for me over the past couple of years, like a couple of different deer that I've chased. One was the adjacent property line. Like I've actually had two instances where the one deer almost got himself killed. It was an early season deer. And I glassed him. I have an early opener where I live. It opens like it's a special regs unit, so it opens like middle of September, so a couple weeks before like the statewide comes in. And I don't really have many like agricultural fields around where I hunt, and this field wasn't like adjacent to where I hunted. It was just kind of like close.
Yep.
So I wasn't even glassing it to like hunt it necessarily or hunt like the deer that were in it necessarily. In my mind, I was like, probably can't hunt them here in the opening, but like maybe I see a good crop of bucks and maybe they show up when they transition, they start spending more time on the public or whatever. Right. And then I'll kind of know, not just what's on camera, but like what's in the general area, It was kind of like, was the plan. And I glassed one. He was, I don't know, between 150 and 160 inches in this bean field that was, a little bit of ways away from the public, but like close enough. Right. Yep. And I just took a flyer in the opening week or the opening Saturday. I was like, you know what? I was like, man, the best betting between like that buck and like the best set of betting. Cause I was like, the does are going to take, there was like a housing complex that was around, not a complex, but there were houses around. I was like, there's a strip of like, not a fence row, but like a buffer strip of like timber, or brush. I was like, and then there's like a little pocket of timber. And then like, if you go a little further, I was like, that's where like the public is. I was like, I doubt does are going to bed in that little buffer strip, maybe like 2 or 3, right? It wasn't very big. So it's not like a whole doe group or doe family could necessarily bed there. I was like, man, the dominant doe family, and this was like ringing true in my head were things that I had talked to Don Higgins about. And so this is where like I think people go wrong, where they think like you can't take things from like public land or from private land to public land. Like if you're hunting in and around private land, it's really good to know how to hunt private land because you'll know how the deer kind of want to use that land as well as the land that you're hunting, right?
Yep.
And so I was just thinking of like things I've learned from Don Higgins about, and Steve Bartilla that I had on it at one point as well. Is like, man, those dominant does are going to take the first best bedding as close to the food sources they can get. That's going to be like the dominant doe bedding, right? Yep. And I was like, the next best bedding after that is going to be on the public, and it's in like the little, whatever it was, like the northwest corner of this piece of public. And I was like, they're probably not going to go on very far. I was like, but they'll probably be right there adjacent to like that private line somewhere.
Yeah.
And so I went in on a flyer and went in with some daylight and hiked to that corner. And when I got to that corner, I was like, I wasn't really seeing any sign. I was like, I took 2 or 3 more steps, man, and I jumped that deer out of a bed. Boom, jumped up and took off. And that was the last time I never saw him again. Yeah. But it's like, it rings true to exactly what you just said, man. He was just across the property line in that first set of bedding that would have been like, really, it was like the second set of like cover because the first set was taken by the doe family. Like I don't know that for sure, but I presumed that.
They're staging it up, they got, that's,
yeah. And so it was that. And then the feature between, like, that's what I ran into this year. That was kind of where I started running into a lot of good stuff, was whenever I was putting a feature between me and where I thought he was moseying to grab a midnight snack,
Yeah. Even in the hills, you got, they're up on the ridges or, on that top third, maybe looking over something like that. But there's always some sort of feature there,
right,
putting himself.
So how do you, if you're chasing a buck, right? And we kind of talked about this a little bit, I chased that deer throughout the season. Like, how do you find hidey holes based on the time of the season, right? Because like the hidey hole he might be using, just say the beginning of the October, right? Could be entirely different than the hidey hole he's going to prioritize middle of October. Could be different from the one he'll prioritize at the end of October, right? Like, it's not like they have a bedroom like we do per se, where it's like, I'm going to sleep in my bed every day all year.
Yeah,
right.
They don't do. Yeah, I haven't seen that. They kind of. Yeah.
Right. It's like, and so how do you find those, or let me ask it this way. What do you prioritize at the different times of year to locate those season specific kind of hidey holes, if that makes sense?
So it has to do a lot with my off-season scouting, and seeing when that sign was laid down. Because I'm at the stage where I'm going into an area and I'm looking for I'm just looking for a certain sign. Like I want to know the biggest buck in the area is in that area. Mm-hmm. And then once I come to the conclusion there's a hell of a deer in there, I'm gonna, based off that rub, because usually he's rubbing that same, it looks the same, it almost always, maybe the same type of trees, same height, same characteristics like we're talking about. And once you follow that thing around the woods, you can see the ages, of the rub, and you can base it off that a little bit. You can base it off of the foliage, as that mid-October, the foliage starts to die off and maybe go down. So that might push them back into more of a brushy situation rather than the grassy stuff. But I'm just kind of following, just putting all that stuff together. What I really look for early season though is like an early season scrape. Like I'm taught before they even shed their velvet.
Okay.
If you can find that, and then because that's usually gonna be leading to some food source they're hitting right away. If I find that, that's usually golden, because then you got like a bachelor group right there, and you got all the bucks in that little area kind of right there.
Right.
That's what I use kind of when I was heading out to North Dakota all the time.
Right.
So
yeah, it's like you hunt the spot I've been hunting.
Yeah. It probably looks the same. Maybe, I don't know.
Right. Yeah. It's because like I have a little, like that's one of the early season spot that I've used. So I've not capitalized on it. I screwed up a really good deer in that exact kind of scenario where I have a scrape that's used year round.
Yeah.
And it really gets used, I'll say like late summer, right? Late summer into like very early part of fall, or that middle of September kind of time frame. And I tried to play it too cute and was too conservative. If I would have just went in, I probably could have killed the deer, but I was trying to nip around the edges because I thought he was going to be around a little longer,
Yeah.
And then he ended up ghosting me. And it's exactly what you're saying. It was connected to food. Like there was a great, and what I kind of learned over time was that spot's always good.
Yeah.
Early season into like the middle of October, it is great when there's a good acorn crop, because that is what the year that it was just dynamite, that's what was happening. Like there was a good acorn drop in that area, and that scrape was just getting hammered every day. Like every buck was in there. And I played it too cute and tried to nip at the edges where I should have just bullied my way in and shot one. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the hardest part to do is though, because I used to go after, I used to hunt spots, hunt deer. Now I'm just going after specific ones, and that's like just changed everything, how I approach everything. But just getting in that deer's head and you're walking around, like late season or something like that, after the season, you're walking around the woods, just in that deer's head, just seeing what he's seeing, find his bed from early season, or, because usually there's going to, maybe outside that staging area, you're going to find some rubs or something right there from him, and just see what he's looking at.
Yeah.
That's the big thing.
Dude, that's so, it's funny you say it that way, because in my mind, I was talking to a buddy of mine, about this particular deer that I chased this year, and he ended up dying of presumably just age, like something either that or he got sick and a coyote got to him or whatever, but he was found dead. I was talking to my buddy Chad about it at one point, and he asked me how bummed I was about it, and I was like, bummed I didn't get to kill him, I was like, I think I'm more bummed that I don't have another year to chase him. I was like, because after this year of following him around for an entire fall, I was like, I know him now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I was like, before I was trying to learn him from trail camera pictures and videos, and then scouting pretty much every day in the fall. I was like, but then I felt like I was always still like a day behind. Like I had one encounter with him. I was like, but I always still felt like I was like a day behind him, know? I was like, now I feel like I've followed him around for a whole season. I was like, where I was like, I now think I can get in front of him, you know? I was like, and it just, it just stinks that he's not around to make that happen. And so that brings me to this question, like how much intel or how much do you like to know a deer before you feel really good about hunting him? Because I felt good last year, but even still, like I was like, I'm going to have to learn something probably pretty significant relatively early in the season for me to actually have a chance to get in front of him. Where now this year, I feel like, man, I would be able to get in front of him. I could tell you where he's going to be first week of October, right? Or second week of October or whatever the case is. And that for me is like, I had like 3 years of history with that deer, right? 1 year in the woods with him, a couple years of trail camera data. So how long do you like to know a deer and be able to follow him in the woods, and see things through his eyes before you feel real good about hunting him?
I just need a day of scouting.
God.
That's it. I just need one. Give me a day of scouting in the off season, and I will, if I find a buck I'm after, I'm gonna have them all, mapped out.
So walk me through that, man, because that's like, I don't know if it's like if I have like a lack of confidence that I could do it that quickly. Like I feel like when I go out of state, I'm better at it because I'm on short time. And so I kind of force myself to make some real quick decisions and just go off of like, historical knowledge, not of that particular deer necessarily, but just like of how things have played out in the past. Right.
Yeah.
So if I give you a day and you have a deer, like what is it that is going to tell you where you need to be, or how what is it that's going to allow you to diagnose that situation that quickly?
Let's say I like, there's a bunch of different spots I'm kind of spreading my wings and finding different areas this year. Let's say I find a buck I want to go after an area. I do my search. I got all his intel as far as where the sign is. I can find out based off that sign when it was made. And then based off all that sign, you can see how he's moving around the area. During that scout that one day, you're gonna find where everybody's sitting in there. Most people leave a little sign where they're sitting. Mm-hmm. So you're gonna see how that deer's moving around all these people and getting around everything. So as long as you know all that, and you kind of know, get in his, you're in his head and you can kind of see what he's seeing and how he's moving around that property. You can put a sit on him,
yeah,
pretty quick, after that.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
go ahead. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was going to say there's, let's say I go to North Dakota and I don't do any pre-scouting out there. Mm-hmm. I started going out there in like 2010, and the first day I get out there is the first day I'm hunting. It's usually that Friday when it opens. So I'm going to specific spots and just looking for a sign, or I'm trying to jump a deer. Mm. And just kind of knowing the area. If I do jump a deer, I kind of know if he's in that area. I know how to hunt that area already. If I know that property like that. But
right. So that's. I wish that I had the confidence of like trusting myself that way, because you really have to be able to you have to really trust your instincts in that regard, right?
You do. So I've been doing, since the mid 90s or whatever. I've been out there running these lands, and this year alone, I'm probably covering over 20,000 acres,
right.
Scouting
right.
every day on small properties all over the place. Illinois, Indiana, going to all these different states, and yeah, after a while it comes pretty, you can cover ground real quick.
Right.
So
how much do you rely on, I like to call it like almost like a Rolodex or like an analog, right? Where it's like you've seen something in one state or on one property, and you see something similar on another property, and you immediately are like, oh, this is what's going to happen, because you've seen it play out somewhere else already. Even though it might be a different state, it might even be different habitat, but it's like maybe it's a terrain feature. You're like, oh, this is how the deer are going to use this. Like, even though couldn't be more different in terms of where they're at, but you're like, yeah, they're going to do the same thing they did in this state using this crossing here. This just isn't a creek crossing; it's just a ditch, but they're going to do the same thing. So,
an analogy for that, so everyone's big into hill country hunting.
Mm-hmm.
That's the big craze. And I hunt a lot of flat properties here. On Onyx or Spartan Forge, you can take that elevation gain all the way down.
Yep.
And so just do that. You can do it. It works inversely on both ways. Let's say you're in hill country, and you want to see how that buck's going to move on flat country. Just take it all the way down, and instead of 100-foot tall hill, it's like a foot.
Right.
And they're still relating to that stuff like they do in hills, and bedding like that, like they're doing in hills.
Right.
It's just on a different. You're just taking that elevation gain and pushing it all the way down to nothing, basically. But you can almost go into a flat property, even a field. You get in some of these fields, and then once you get out there, they're not really flat. There's like dips and nooks and crannies, and you can see like, okay, and then bucks are the deer are gonna be bedded in that little hollow wallow over there or whatever. But
right.
And those are two different types of terrain features, flat versus the hill, and you can relate, and they all relate. How the deer will move around that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hunting flat ground, because I hunt a fair amount of flat ground. Even whenever I'm in the mountain, you're already kind of on top of the mountain, so everything's pretty flat already, right? There's not a lot of elevation change. And so I've had to kind of, like, actually where I found the most consistency are little areas where I did find just like subtle little changes in slope or elevation or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, it's that like they don't need much,
No.
right, to use. Like they kind of gravitate to any of those little kind of like changes, you know,
Yep.
whether it's habitat change or whether it's terrain change or whatever it is. It's like it can be, we look at it and go like, well, that's not that much.
Yeah.
But to the deer,
It's everything.
Yeah. You know, it's like they live by it. They live and die by it, you know.
Just the way the wind kind of, even flat country, even the way that wind kind of just filters around, you know, like a river, it's just kind of flowing around there. And
Yeah. Do you find, what do you find more challenging, flat country or hill country?
I think these marshes kick my ass every year.
Do they?
Oh yeah, they do.
Yeah.
I never related it to, like, when I was going to a different state or whatever and hunting hillier. It was hillier terrain, but I never really said, "Oh, I'm hunting hill country." You know? I'm just hunting different.
Right.
You know, I never looked at it like this. I'm just like, "Oh, I'm here. The deer are going to relate to here and do this and do this." You know.
Mm-hmm.
But these marshes around here, you know, let's say you got, you know, a couple 1,000-acre marsh. That deer can bed anywhere.
Yeah.
The grass is up to your chest. There's brush. There's cattails sometimes. I mean, the deer can be anywhere in that. And so you really got to put the time in and scout it and realize how how the family groups are moving around, how the deer are moving around. So I'd almost say some of that's harder than hill country. I mean, hill country might be a little more strenuous on your calves.
Right.
You know? And
That's what I've always said, whereas like the hardest hunting for me is flat country. Like, you know, I don't have necessarily big old marshes around here. I have, you know, probably more like swamps, you know, and they won't be anywhere near the size of like a marsh that you guys have. Like if it's an acre or 2 acres or 3 acres even or whatever, it's like that's a big swamp here, you know, and it's usually on top of a mountain somewhere where it's just like where the mountain finally flattens out and can collect water and stuff like that is a lot of times where I'll find them. And then locally, it's like I'm not far from New Jersey, so it's like obviously low-lying land, a lot of it around here as well. But I always say it's like I would much rather hunt hill country because to me, I mean, I also grew up in Western PA where it was hills and stuff like that, and so how deer like to use that landscape just has always made a lot more sense to me. Probably because I just saw it a lot growing up, right? Yeah. And I can predict a little bit more, you know, what the wind and thermals are going to do in those areas a little bit better. I can predict a little bit more how deer want to move because there's terrain features and things, and maybe it's terrain with vegetation, right? Thick vegetation, whatever it's going to force them to move in this direction or whatever the case is, right?
Correct.
I just find in flat ground, like the edges are so much more subtle. And so like if you're looking for edges and stuff like that, it's like they're just not as obvious, you know. Like you at times could walk by something that the deer are using as an edge and you would look at it and be like, there's nothing there.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, it's each I guess type has their pros and cons, you know. I mean, it's maybe the hill country guys are going to be mad at them.
Right. Like, hell no, it's harder, you know. It's like
I went to Illinois this year. I haven't hunted it yet, but I scouted a bunch of properties out there, and it was walking around it, and it seemed easier to figure out where stuff was or how the deer are going to be bedded and stuff. You know, I'm sure it's still hard to get on them, but
yeah. I mean, I think with that stuff, like some of it becomes, you know, at least in my experience, was you know, access. You know, I think becomes a little bit more. Can be, I won't say all the time, but can be more challenging. That was probably like, at least for me personally, like where the biggest challenge was. Like I would typically know where they wanted to be and how they wanted to travel. Yeah. The challenge was always like, how do I get there? Right. Yeah. Where with flat ground for me, it's more where the heck are they at? Right. Yeah. Because like there's not always an obvious area where they want to bed or spend time.
Correct.
You know? And I don't know if you run into this, but like for me, at least in this big woods piece, you know, and I've talked to this with, you know, buddies of mine that hunt a lot of big woods, is that a lot of it is you would think a deer has never lived there ever, right? Where it's just so you and I could stand 50 yards apart and throw a football to one another. Like it's that open, you know? Yep. And it could be, you know, I was telling a buddy of mine at one point, and he just kind of laughed because he's like, that's unbelievable. Like, because I was like, I walked at 1.3 miles in one direction, never ran into any deer sign, never ran into like anything that would remotely look like deer habitat.
Yeah.
He was like, and he was just like, I can't, he's like, I don't know what the heck I would do there. You know what I mean? And I was like, and what I found was like, you find like these little pockets where it's like all of a sudden, like the habitat and everything just kind of gets right and it shows up.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It's just like, and boom, that's where the deer want to be.
Yep.
Right. Do you kind of have, do you have similar kind of experience where you're at as well?
That's the same. Same with the marshes like that. You're going to find those groups of deer pockets and then how they move it out. But I did we used to gun hunt up in the Squamish and Nicolet here in northern Wisconsin, and it's big country. Mm-hmm. And you could walk and never see any deer sign up there, you know. And then you'd find this pocket, you know, on this coming out of this spruce swamp or whatever, you know. You got an oak flat over here, and then just the habitat's just right, you know, the stem density's just right, and that's where all the we find that up here too.
Yeah. So. Yeah. How maddening is that?
It's I'll tell you what,
especially when you're scouting, you're out walking a whole day and like you're just like, man, I got nothing done today.
If the guy that can go up to northern Michigan, northern Wisconsin, northern Minnesota and get it done on a regular basis and take, you know, I'm not saying that, you know, the deer are different up there, you know, because they're getting pressured by wolves all the time, but the guy that can consistently get it done up there, that's pretty good.
Knows what he's doing.
He knows what he's doing, yeah. And they might not have 150, 160 inch bucks running around, but it takes a hell of a guy to go up there and get it done up there. I'll tell you, it can be maddening. Yeah.
That was what I was kind of, you know, running into in that big woods piece for the first couple years. The first couple years I didn't even hunt it. I was just trying to learn it. You know, I was just trying to understand it because it was just a lot different from. I've hunted big woods before, but places I've hunted big woods in the past were more like in Ohio and stuff like that, where there's some like tracts of land that I hunted that were like multiple tens of thousands of acres, but they have very defined terrain features in very kind of defined areas where you're going to find deer where they want to travel, where they want to bed, like, you know, kind of classic hill, like Southern Ohio hill country stuff. Right. Yeah. And the area that I've been hunting the past couple of years here, it's just like, man, it's like it's steep in certain areas, and then in other areas it's completely flat and devoid of good habitat, you know. And so, I mean, I've found beds in areas where I'm like, why is there a bed here? Yep. You know what I mean? Like I've walked across from like, it's in the middle of the open, like there's nothing around them that could protect them, right? It just they could bed anywhere, you know. And I think they do. I think sometimes they just lay down.
They do, yeah.
You know,
I'd like to see people more, instead of going to the, you know, like the Midwest stuff, challenge yourself, go up north, hunt that big wood stuff. Yeah. You know, if you want to really hone your craft and, you know, be a good deer hunter, I'll tell you it'll humble you, but it'll hone you also, you know.
I mean, how important is that for you? You know, because I feel like, you know, you've been doing it a long time and you've had a lot of success, right? And I'm always an advocate of doing things that are hard, like and sometimes I do things that I know that I almost have like 100% certainty that I'm going to fail, right? But I go do it anyway, try to have a good attitude about it, right? Because I'm going to try to learn something. This year was a good example of that. Like that deer, I knew that area hunted really hard. It doesn't hunt good early season. It's more of like a rut area to hunt if you're going to hunt it, if you want to have success there. Like rut's probably your best chance. Hunting it, I have some buddies who live up there, and they're like, you know, hunting it anytime prior to like the last week of October is almost like what are you doing? You know? And I was like, I'm either going to like kill this deer or I'm going to let him teach me something this year. And that was my kind of goal going into it. And so how important has it been for you to kind of take on like things where, you know, like, man, I'm going to be up against it, but I just feel like I need to do this to break the ceiling, like to break through the ceiling to get to the next thing that I need to evolve to, right? Like how important has that been for you, like in the past 25 plus years?
It's everything now. I look for the challenge more. I want to get my ass kicked by that deer. I want him to beat me. There's a buck I've been going after for 4 years. I hope he's still alive. And he kicks my ass every chance encounter after encounter he's winning. But that buck has taught me so much. Yeah. You know, just the movement of the landscape, the time frames, how it's taught me so much on, you know, about deer hunting. But that means everything. I mean, back in the day, I bought a plat book, went over to Buffalo County, the premier county in Wisconsin. I scouted all the public there, except the Tiffany Bottoms area. I need a canoe for that, but I scouted out all that, and I found myself saying, I don't want to come over here just because it's easier, I think I can replicate that back in the center part of the state where it's really shitty hunting.
Yeah.
This is all sand country out here, so we got everything. It's like Traverse City, where that sand, where Rompela got his big one.
Yep.
But it's all, I want to replicate that here. I know it's going to take a lot more work, and it's going to take a lot more effort, but it's going to be a lot more rewarding. But I think I can find just as big a buck in the center part of the state as you can in Illinois and all these other states.
Yeah.
It's going to take some work.
Yeah.
And I like that.
Yeah. It's I kind of had the same feeling, when I started exploring this northern piece. It was I didn't really know what I was getting into at first, I guess is one way to put it, and did some scouting. Wasn't sure what I was looking at 100%, right? Because I wasn't sure, like, is this good sign? Is this a bad sign for the area? Like, I didn't have any context yet.
Yeah.
And I ran trail cameras for like a season and never hunted it. And then I pulled cameras. And I happened to have some really good camera setups, and was like, okay, all right. I was like, the age class of deer looks good. The caliber of deer looks good. And then that was kind of like when the light bulb went off, where I was like, there's got to be some special stuff here. Like, you can't have this much acreage and this many places for deer to hide and not have some special critters running around somewhere.
Correct.
Right. Yep. That was kind of like my thinking. So it sounds like you kind of thought the same.
Yeah. I mean, there's someone shooting, every once in a while you see a big one get shot. I'm like, well, why travel to all these other states or, spend $1,000 on a tag somewhere or any of that stuff. And, you can replicate that. Even in PA, there's some monsters getting shot there. So why not you, Why,
Don't tell anybody.
Why not, why can't I do that? I just got to put in the time and effort and, it's going to be hard.
Yeah, that's the thing. You said it earlier. People are always looking for that silver bullet, the quick fix. I think as I go, like, I'm more and more interested in, like, the challenge of things. Like, even when I went to the Midwest, and the challenge for me going to like a plain state was like, man, I'm so used to being in a tree, and having that as like my protection, so to speak. Like, I can have foliage, I can have, like, I can hunt in a saddle. It's like I can get behind the tree, I can put something between me and the deer. Like, there was always, I can play the wind a little bit better if I'm up above them. Like, I can kind of cheat that a little bit more at times and stuff like that. And, really trying to put certain things in my favor. And the one part that I always kind of, I don't want to say missed, but was always curious about was that if I had nothing between me and a deer, and I had to do it on the ground, I didn't have any other way to do it, could I beat, could I beat one?
Yep.
And not just one, could I beat, like a mature one.
Yeah.
Right. And that wasn't really my goal at first, necessarily. At first, it was just like, can I get a good deer on the ground, while hunting him on the ground, with nothing between me and him. Right. It just so happened the first one ended up being a really good mature deer. Right. Yeah. And that was the allure for me for that. Was like, can I do it eye to eye with them on their terms? Like, I got to do it the same way they're living is the only way I have an opportunity to get it done.
Crawling through the grass, and that's
Yeah, and now I have the same kind of feeling with PA, my home state, where it's like I now kind of have this idea of like, man, I wonder if I can, achieve the goals that I have here. I wonder if and what I'm learning is the answer is yes. Right? It's just a matter of like, it may not happen on the timeline I want it to happen on.
Yeah.
And you have to be okay with that. The deer are more in charge than we are most of the time.
Yeah. Once you get out there and start just scouting year after year different properties and putting it together and getting that resume of, genetics and age structure and just putting everything together, you can really get on something.
Yeah. So when you are looking, like, what are you because you're at a point in your hunting journey, right, where it's you're looking for specific things. It sounds like, right? And so, how do you determine, if a place has what you're looking for?
I need to get a visual on that deer.
Yeah. Trail camera, like
usually trail camera or glassing. But it all starts in the off season by finding enough spots where I think a big buck's going to be, and then based off his sign. And then I just need to know that buck is alive because I already got that spot pre-scouted. And it's either going to be by glassing if I don't need to put a camera in there, or it's going to be by one camera on a staging area just outside that bedding. I just need to know he's alive.
Right.
And then I'm looking at, I need the right genetics. I'm looking for, a type of genetic, typical type genetic with good age structure. And you can base that too off historical sign, what kind of age structures in that area. Is there always a nice buck in this area, or did it get clear cut maybe 3 years ago and everybody kind of got out of there, and maybe the nice buck is able to grow up, put a couple years on him. But but I need to get a visual on him though. I'm not going to hunt a ghost,
Right.
So I need to get some sort of visual to put my roster together for going after a deer.
So I want to go back to that deer you hunted that that your hope is still alive, because you said he's been kicking your rear. Like, what do you think the most valuable lesson is that deer has taught you?
How he moves about the landscape.
Yeah. Is it unique to like other deer, or do you think that the way he moves is going to be somewhat similar to other deer of that age will use landscape similarly?
I kind of know the layout of how all the deer are moving around this marsh, but that specific deer, how he's relating to the landscape, how he's getting away from people. So everybody's like, I'm going in deep, and I'm like, where are you gonna hunt? I'm just gonna go over here, I kind of play it coy, just because they're walking by the biggest deer in the marsh, and I'm just like, hey, see you later, But I can't believe that the deer I do find, that nobody's hunting them, in different areas, not just that one, but all these other areas. The deer you find, and you just notice nobody's really hunting that specific deer. And that's the neatest thing about it, how they can live right underneath your nose. And, you're like, oh yeah, my buddy shot a fork horn. And I'm like, if you knew what was in here, you would,
Right, it's like you're 100 yards away from the biggest deer in the whole place.
Yeah, honestly, yeah. I mean, there's the parking lot. My camera's 50 yards off the parking lot. I'm getting pictures of them or something like that. I mean, it's, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it happens a lot more than people think.
Wow.
It's
there's another deer too. You just got me in a tangent, but another deer.
I love it. Yeah, let's do it.
I found a shed 2 years ago, and it had really good. It was my biggest shed ever found, just under 70 inches for that side.
Wow.
And I'm like, and I noticed by the sign in that area that I was about a year behind that deer. Just off the sign. Found a shed. But I noticed the genetics in that area were really good, based off the tie and length and everything. I'm like, that's something to keep an eye out. I'm going to keep tabs in that area. I went back there, and I scouted the heck out of it, and I never really got in on that deer or figured out anything. I went back this year, scouted a different area out there, and I found rubs from a couple years ago, and I could see how a big buck, maybe that one's still alive, how he was using that area. And then I could see how people were hunting that deer. So someone knew that deer was back there, and I could tell how they were set up. And then based off how they were set up, they got a little bit of intrusive, and they bumped that deer to a different area. And I was able to pick up on how they bumped that deer a quarter mile, to another little spot where that was fresh sign now. And nobody's intruding on that deer. And I mean, this is really big. I mean, you look at the sign, big as your thigh, these rubs up, chest high. I'm like, holy shit.
Yeah.
And, but it was neat to be able to follow how that it was probably the same deer, how he's moving around based off the pressure, how people are kind of pushing him around.
Right.
That,
and he didn't go all that far.
No.
You know what I mean? Because that's the thing. It's like people think that deer, you know, kind of leave the state or whatever. It's like, especially those older deer, man. It's like when they find an area that they like, that they're going to call home.
Yeah.
Like you got to almost like shoehorn them out. Like they're not going to leave. They're not going to go very far willingly. I guess put it that way is kind of like what I've found.
You can booger it up pretty good by, you know, I know he's going to be on public land sometimes, but I also know he's going to cross this road and then he's going to be on these. He'll be on private land on some vacation properties that don't look like they hunt.
Right.
So, you know, he's
perfect place for a deer to grow old.
Exactly. So you just kind of put that in the piggy bank. But I'm gonna be finding out if that buck's still alive. I think he's still alive though, just based off the sign and the bed I found and stuff. I just need a visual.
Yeah, nice. the all important visual, man.
I need. Yeah, you don't want to hunt a ghost.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's and also it's like if you don't have that, it's like you're hope hunting, you know. And a lot of people do that, right? It's like Correct. They go into a spot and maybe they know a deer was there at some point, or you know, or they got a picture of him once. You know what I mean? And like you don't know whether that deer's still alive or if he is still around or whatever the case is. And then they're sitting hoping that something comes by, as opposed to setting up, having a good idea that like if things are right, he could walk by. You know,
I don't want to waste sits. Every sit I want to go out there and take a shot. You know,
right? Yeah.
I just
How many days a year are you hunting?
Oh,
roughly
as many as I can.
Right.
I can hunt a lot. I got a lot of public land around here I can dink around on, but quite a few. I mean, there was a time probably before I got a 9-year-old boy, but before that, a long time, I think I'd sat maybe 30, 60 days in a row sometimes.
Oh, man.
But we're not all day. We're talking.
Right. Couple hours in the morning, get out after work early, jump in a tree for a couple hours.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, there's so much land around. There's so much public land out here. And, you know, you just got to know where to find it, you know, what to look for. But there's a lot of it's not listed per se.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But even by you, I bet you there's look for a group called the Nature Conservancy.
Oh yeah, I've hunted some of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all over the country, right?
Yep.
So, and that's not listed anywhere, posted anywhere, you know.
Yep.
It's there's things like that you can look at, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a group at one point. Actually, it was a buddy of mine hunted some conservancy land around here. Yeah. And he's the one who kind of turned me on to it, and I had to talk to a guy, and you have to get permission from them. It's public, but here you had to get permission from them, or whatever. And so he put me in contact with the guy, and I had a conversation with him, and he was like, "Yep," he basically said like, "Hey, these spots over here, there's a couple," because there was a couple different pieces that were like close to me, and he was like, "Hey, these spots over here, there's a couple guys that are already in over here, so just." If you wouldn't mind, avoid that. But there's a piece over here, nobody's on it. He's like, you can just you can do whatever you want to, or not whatever I want, obviously, but like, it's yours to hunt. Do whatever you want, right? And so I hung some cameras in there, and it's such a off the beaten path little place, right? It wasn't that big. I took a walk through it right after I got permission, and I didn't get permission till probably July or something like that. And I took a walk through, and just like the historical rubs that were in there, I was like, whoa. I was like, okay. And this is like a spot that was like, when I say not big, like not big at all. Yeah. Like I was looking at it as like a burner piece. I was like, it's not far from my house. It's like I could probably get out after work, like morning or an evening, maybe shoot some does. Like I wasn't thinking much of it.
Yep.
And I saw those rubs, and I threw a camera up, and there were 3 deer in there. And this is all like it was suburbs too, so it wasn't in in the middle of nowhere. It was like there was houses that weren't far away from like a lot of this piece. Like a lot of these deer are probably eating out of people's bird feeders, and stuff like that. And there was a deer that was like 150 inches, and then there were 2 that were probably in like the mid 130s. Yeah, and I was like,
nice deer anywhere. Nice deer.
And I was like, get out of here, and then. But the problem with that place was because of all the houses around, man, the access to that place was almost impossible.
Yeah.
Like to the wind that you wanted to hunt it on, you couldn't access it. And that's the wind that the deer wanted to use it. And the wind you needed to access it, the deer didn't want to be on it.
Yeah.
So it was one of those, I ended up just killing a couple does out of there at one point. And then I saw a couple bucks, just never got a crack. And one good one busted me.
Yeah.
As I was climbing into my tree, like it literally walked up like 15 yards and like standing there. And you ever get that feeling when you're climbing up and you're like, man, I feel like there's something behind me.
that happened a couple years back. I had planned to go a couple miles into this one spot. It's kind of a real crappy way to, how I got to get in. And I was, you don't never pass up fresh sign, right?
Yep.
So I'm walking through this marshy area, and all of a sudden I get to this area and it's all ripped up, real fresh rubs. So I just go boom. I just stopped right there, and I'm like, okay, I got to get to that tree right there, which is like 20 feet away. Mm-hmm. So I made my way around this pocket, and I was able to get one stick on, got my second stick, and I was like 8 feet up, and there's a buck bedded, 30 feet away, looking at me through the grass. So he takes off. But I ended up, it's early season, batcher group, right? I'm like, okay, maybe, we'll see what happens. So I set up. A couple hours go by, and 60 yards away I can see a rack in the grass moving around. And that damn buck, he gets up about 10 minutes before closing time. No pressure at all yet this year, right, for that buck. And he just sits there, just scent checking the wind. He wouldn't move, and all that. When it got dark out, I could hear him walk away. So a month and a half later, I killed him. So.
Did you?
I went back to that original spot I wanted to go.
Yeah.
Way back in there, and I killed him back there.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Goodness. Isn't it funny how cagey they are, though, man? Like how, there was no reason for that buck not to just get up and walk about or whatever, right?
None.
But like they're just they have a certain kind of apprehension that younger deer just don't have.
They're on their own time frame. They know that they're just waiting until dark. It's a little safer for them, and they don't have anywhere to be. Like we want them to come on. They don't.
Right. Yeah, we got to leave soon.
I got to leave. Yeah.
Yeah. They're like, I got all the time in the world.
I got all it. Yeah. I just got to go to this field, eat some crap, and come back in the morning. I don't, And,
yeah, and I'm not even quite hungry yet.
Yeah.
It's like
but that opened my eyes up, though. I'm like, holy shit, I'm like that really opens your eyes up to how they don't move. You hear Dan Infall talk about that too, and sometimes you've got to be right on those deer.
Yeah.
So sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, they're just. I always think that, it's not breaking news. Like the best way to learn deer is to be around deer, right?
Yeah.
And that for me was, I think anyone who's never, put it this way, if somebody who's listening, is from a state that has a ton of pressure, maybe you're in the like northeast part of the country, or you're in PA, or maybe you're in an area of Wisconsin or Michigan that just gets hammered with pressure, right? And you don't get to see very many mature deer very often, right? Because there are folks who just don't see a lot of them. I'm one of them in Pennsylvania. It's like if I see a mature buck a year, like that's a pretty good year. Now it's getting better, right? Specifically like certain parts of the state, but there's still plenty of parts of PA that you just don't see a lot of mature deer, right? I always kind of tell people like you should at least once go to a good like buck state, and just even if you don't kill one, just spend the week, 2 weeks, however much vacation time you have, and just observe every mature buck you get to see and just watch them for as long as you can, right? Because that was probably the biggest eye opener for me was a guy coming from PA that would maybe get 1, maybe 2 encounters with a mature deer a year.
That's it, yeah.
And that's it, right? That's all you're going to get. And when I say encounter, it's like not even get an arrow off, but just like, and that encounter might have only lasted 15, 20 seconds each, and that might be all you got, right? So I got 30 seconds in a year of observing a mature buck do mature buck things, right? And then I went to Iowa, and I'm not saying necessarily you need to go to Iowa, but just go to a state that has a more target-rich environment for mature deer. And I spent 2 weeks there, and I had as many mature deer encounters and watched as many mature deer. It would have taken me probably 8 years to have that many encounters in Pennsylvania. And what I said to people was like, I felt like it expedited my learning curve on understanding what mature deer were looking for, because I just got to watch mature deer do mature deer things, right?
Yeah.
How they used the wind, how cautious they were, how they reacted to when other deer were around, how they reacted whenever they winded me. You know what I mean? Like just all those things. Like I got to see what a cagey buck wants to do. And then it all started making a lot more sense, right? Because I had seen all those things happen, right? I didn't just hear someone tell me about it. I didn't read about it somewhere. I actually observed it, right?
Yeah.
And I felt like what I had said was like, aside from killing a buck while I was there, I felt like I got a master class on mature buck behavior while I was there.
Yep.
And to me, it was like, until you have some of that, I think it's really hard to hunt mature deer because they just don't act like anything else. And like people hear people say that and they don't know what it means until you actually see it. And then you're like, oh, I get it. Like they don't act like the rest of the deer. They are like a completely different species. If you're hunting where all the deer want to be, chances are that the buck you want to kill doesn't want to be there.
He's around, but he's just lurking in the shadows.
Yeah.
He's like keeping tabs and everything, but he's there, but he's just kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
It's crazy. You'll find too. Let's say you'll get. Let's say you get a pair of bucks, that are running together. And for whatever reason, that one buck gets knocked off, and then all of a sudden the buck he was running with, he just becomes like a recluse, because his buddies, I don't know what it is, but it's like they were friends. Buddy gets shot off, and then he just,
Yeah.
It's kind of neat.
Yeah, it's just their social dynamics of the individual deer, and how they react to to the group or not, is really interesting. Because for me, the deer I chased this past year, what was really kind of interesting was that this deer, even during the summer, like I may have only ever, I'm trying to think, maybe twice over the course of 4 seasons of photos and videos of him, have I ever seen him with another deer.
Yeah.
Like he was never with other deer. Even during the summer when he should be bachelored up, I think only twice over those 4 years that I ever see him with another deer in the summer.
Yeah.
Once fall hit, forget about it. Like he was never with another deer. Even in the summer though, he was like rarely ever with another deer.
Yeah.
Which made it odd because I couldn't use what other deer in the area wanted to do because he was never with them.
That's where you got to hone in on that one deer and hunt that one deer.
Yeah.
That's the different game right there, hunting the deer or
some deer.
The deer.
The deer. Yeah.
The deer.
Yeah.
And that's why you got to just get inside that individual deer's head and you got to figure out that deer.
Right.
And that's the hardest part,
Yeah. So how do you go about doing that? Like when do you feel like you're inside? And I know you said, previously, like, if there's a good deer in there, just give me one day of scouting and I can figure it out.
Yeah.
But when you're trying to get inside of that deer's head, like let's use the one that's beat you up for 4 years, right? It's like,
I've had multiple encounters with him, and
right. Like, how do you get inside of that guy's head, right? Because he's got something on you, right?
Yeah, the way. I mean, you're finding where he's bedded. You're finding how he's moving, and you're moving like he is through the woods after season. You're figuring out what he's seeing. You're just. I'm always close to him. You're always, but it's one time. I'm always, right away I'm taking my shots at that deer, and a couple different years now I've had him like opening morning, coming back to his bed, and all of a sudden that wind will shift. Like we'll get it, it's kind of steady, but then it stops and it starts pulling back towards him. And sure shit, right when it starts pulling back, he's, gone. Or, I'm creeping in at night. I know he's bedded in one of these clusters of brush, based off of what I'm seeing. I walk around this one cluster of brush, I get up, and he jumps up 20 feet behind me that I just, he's gone.
Right.
Or I hunting over that mock scrape I put up, and I know he's in this area here, and I just get down from my stand, and there he comes walking in, just after daylight. It's like,
he just has impeccable timing.
It's weird. But yeah, I mean, you really got to, just put yourself in that deer's head. Figure out what his sign is, what his track is possibly, if you can, and follow based off sightings, sign, tracks, all that crap, how he's manipulating,
right,
his home range, just how he's really using that.
So how do you kill this deer this year? If
he's still alive,
let's assume that he is.
Yeah.
Positive thoughts here.
I actually wished he would die. I'm like, I'm done. No, I did. I'm like, I had enough of this guy. I wish he would just leave,
Yeah.
So
let you get on with your life.
Let me get on with my life. It's year after year after, like last year, I'm planning my vacation around this deer.
Right.
Because I know October 16th to the 18th, he shifts a half mile in this marsh. I know that, just based off of prior year's experience. And yeah, I've done anything on that deer, so I'm hoping he's not alive, honestly. But if I do get, if I do get a sighting of him, I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna monitor one spot, and usually I can put a camera on one spot in that area, and I will get every buck in that area. I'll have that buck on camera. It'll be coming out of this bedding complex, going towards the private, or I may drop a mock scrape in there, but all those deer will go to that one camera. I'll get every, picture on them.
So you mentioned mock scrape. Like how often do you use mock scrapes, or how consistent is that, like a tactic that you deploy?
I've used it quite extensively the past few years, just to gain inventory.
Yeah.
But I'm not just throwing it out willy-nilly hoping. I want to see if that buck is alive that I'm after based on that sign. That's the only reason I'm using it.
Right.
And I'm throwing those into staging areas, right outside the bedding that they're specific. I just need a visual on it.
Just need a visual.
And that mock scrape is something that just they're gonna come there within a month or
Yeah.
I'll get picture of every single buck in that area. But you can also use them too to let's say you got that buck, he's bedding on the public, but he's not bedding far enough off the line for you to get around. You put that mock scrape off to the side, you might be able to draw him off to the side before where you can get at him.
Just try to pull him just a little, make him just go a little bit out of the way.
Just something like that. But but I do use mock scrapes a lot as far as just to see if that buck's still alive in that area. I'm using them less in certain areas because it's everyone's doing it now.
Right.
I'm seeing ropes hanging.
Yeah.
So you almost less is more kind of. It's starting to get so.
Yeah. Being more particular, more strategic with how you're using them, when you're using them, where you're placing them.
Yeah, you got to have it in the right area. It's location with those.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. I've found with them. Like I've used them quite a bit. Like over the years, and it's very similar to what you're saying. Is where it's if I'm in an area where there's one that's coming to mind. It was probably. I don't do them as often as I used to, just because of the same thing you're saying. Is like they're just all over the place,
Yeah.
And so I primarily just try to find like a good community scrape or in the general area, if I feel like that specific spot is either like hard to get to where I'm going to booger stuff up getting to it, or maybe it's too close to bedding that I don't want to be that far. It's like I might put one on the outskirts, and just see what inventory I can get, on that one. But there was one area where I had a pretty decent setup. There was a bunch of rubs, but there weren't any like scrapes in and around the area. And I put a mock scrape up, and, it was just one of those things where it's like, I knew there were bucks in the area. I just didn't know what bucks, and I didn't know how frequently they might be around. And so I kind of used it for that. And I ended up not even hunting this area during like the later part of the season. I think I hunted it like the opening 2 weeks or whatever to try to kill a doe in there off the ground. But when I went back and checked, it was like there were 2 really good bucks that were kind of frequenting that area, late October. They were starting to pass through. So it's obviously it wasn't an area that was close to like where bucks were bedding, there were doe families that were in and around there all the time. And so I was like, and it helped me kind of like understand. I was like, okay, this is a later in the year setup. If I'm going to hunt this, it's probably not an earlier part of the year, because there was a food source that wasn't too far away. And so I thought I might be able to catch some bucks that were kind of coming through and using like a bed to food pattern earlier in the year. And I was trying to get them to stop there to see like who's around. But what that inventory basically told me was that like this is clearly a rut spot, and that is it.
If you can get your intel without a camera, that's way better.
Oh yeah,
If you don't have to put a camera, like a lot of these places I'm putting them, I can't monitor.
Yeah.
From the road or but even if you can find the tracks, if you got a clue what that deer track looks like, and you can go to a certain spot, make a little track trap or something on the trail coming out, and just walk out there and just look at that, without having a camera out there.
So track trap, talk to me about that. Like I needed that last year is what I needed.
I've even, before cameras, we had to do a lot of different things. So, all the guys were scuffing up the ground on the trails, and then you could check them either in the morning or at night to see when the deer are coming by, before the just timer strings they had and all that stuff. But I use them a lot. I'll go for a bike ride, and like on the public, and I will I'll scuff up the ground before it gets to the road, and then I can just take a bike ride, get my exercise, and check those on a nightly basis to see all the deer.
See what's crossing.
Yeah, every single deer will cross, coming off of that public back and forth. So
it's such a good idea.
It's unobtrusive. They're crossing right there. You can look in there. There's a 4-finger track. Yeah, that's my boy,
Right.
So.
Yeah, it's such a good idea. I should have been doing that last year. I found a real good track last year. I knew it wasn't my guy last year.
Yeah.
I could not find his track to save my life. That was partially why I felt like I was always like a day behind him.
Yep.
I could just never cut his track. And then I went out close to where I was parking the one night, and when I walked out, I don't even know why I looked down at the ground. I might have dropped my gloves or something like that. I don't even remember what it was. It was dark out, and I bent over and my light hit the ground, and I was just like, whoa. I was like, that's not my guy. It's not in the right area. I was like, I hope that deer makes it. Because it was hard ground, and we hadn't had that much, like we had a pretty dry fall last year. So it wasn't like, you were having to deal with any splay or anything like that. And that was a 4-finger track, and you could see dew claw marks too. You know what I mean? Where it was like, okay, this was a heavy deer, and that track is big and this ground is hard,
Yeah. When you can walk up to a track and just go whoonk, that's exciting.
That's the real deal right there.
That's the real deal. And they're hard to come by.
Yeah.
That's a hard deer to find around here.
Yeah.
You can just take 4 fingers and put them in there. I mean, that's.
Yeah, I'll have to text you that 4-finger track after we're done with this, just so you can see it. Yeah, because I literally like put my hand next to it, and like I was so excited about it. I sent it to my friend, and my friend was like, "Dude, your blood pressure okay? Like your hand looks red." I was like, "I'm pretty fired up." I got
a set of hooves in the tree out here that were from my muzzleloader buck last year.
Oh, really?
That had a 4-finger track. Yeah,
jeez.
Yeah, that's that one there. That's
nice. Yeah,
but.
Goodness. But it's, man, I want to ask you a couple more questions. I want to be sensitive to your time here, because I want to talk to you a little bit about out-of-state hunting, because I know you like to travel to hunt as well. And I'm always curious about this, because I kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier when I mentioned I hunt better out-of-state than I do in my home state. And I think it's because I'm on short time, and so I'm just reading the sign, making decisions, and going with what I'm seeing, right? Don't overanalyze it too much, right?
Correct.
So I'm just curious for you, do you make any adjustment to how you do things when you travel out of state, or do you kind of keep the same approach?
It's a different approach because I'm not doing any pre-scouting out there.
Mm-hmm.
Let's we'll take North Dakota for instance. I've been going out there since 2010, and I'll go out there and it's just on the go scouting out there, it's real-time sign, and it's just on-the-go scouting, where Wisconsin is not like that. That's the one, that's my one separate approach. I don't do any prior scouting when I go to a place like that.
Right.
It's all based off a historical sign, what I've seen in the past.
Right. So in Wisconsin, are you doing a lot of in-season scouting as well, or do you do most of your scouting just like in the postseason? You kind of rely on that and set a plan?
Both.
Okay.
Both, yeah. I'm coming. Yeah. So Wisconsin, it's a lot of off-season scouting, but in the season, you're always looking. You're as you hunt your way in, you're maybe taking a different route in there, and you're keeping up on the sign and how they're moving around.
Right.
There's definitely a lot of in-season scouting too.
Right.
But
in season, like scouting versus hunting, what do you think the percentage breakdown is?
It's probably in-season scouting versus hunting. It's probably like a 60-40.
Yeah. That's pretty consistent with like a lot of the guys that that I look at and I have a lot of respect for, like as far as like their ability to consistently kill.
Correct.
It's usually like a 60-40 split where they spend about 60% of their time scouting, 40% of their time actually hunting.
It's because if you're hunting weekends like most of us do, a lot changes in that 5 days.
Yeah.
So you're always trying to reconnect with that deer after. The food sources are changing on a daily basis, so you're really trying to, get in there.
And that's a hard thing to do, man. That's a hard thing to do. That's why it's like when I talk to guys like you who have success as consistently as you do, and you're hunting predominantly weekends, it sounds like, right? Like in days off and stuff like that.
Maybe after work or something, but predominantly weekends.
Yeah.
So it's like on vacation, correct.
And that's hard to do. Like that was the biggest kind of, I don't want to say eye-opener for me, but that was, so I work remotely, I work from home. And so last year when I was chasing that deer, I was living out of a little travel trailer that I built. And for the most part, I would take it to a place that I could camp, and I would set it up, and I had a Starlink, and I would work. I would go out and hunt the morning. I'd come home, get on Starlink, take all my calls and my meetings, do whatever I have to do. And then I would dip out a little bit early, and I would go hit the woods in the evening. And if I didn't feel like I had a good setup for the evening, I would just go scout.
Yep.
Right. And then if I saw something I really liked, I'm like, oh man, I'm going to hunt this tomorrow morning. Yep. And then, but if I didn't have anything in the morning, I would always just kind of walk in somewhere, set up. And then if I didn't have anything substantial, then I'd get down and I would start walking until I had to get back to the trailer and I was talking to a buddy of mine about it, and I just said, I was like, man, it was hard. I was like, cause I was up a lot and up late, up early to bed late, not getting a ton of sleep. And it was, not easy. I was like, but I always felt like I was in the game because I was just following like how things were changing every day.
Yeah.
I was like, it's so hard to do when you're PA, you can't hunt Sundays. So it's not like I can even scout Saturday and set myself up to hunt Sunday. Yeah. It's like you'd have to scout the morning and then just hunt the evening, essentially if you wanted to do that right in PA. Yeah. But it just made me realize how much harder it is whenever you are only hunting like Saturdays and Sundays. Because you have that whole time. So much can change in 5 days in the deer woods that time of year. It's ridiculous,
Yeah, big time. It's tough to keep. That's probably the hardest thing in season as far as just keeping up with the flow of things. And you might have an acorn tree dropping.
It'll change everything.
Tuesday, it starts dropping Tuesday, and you got a plan to go out over here on Saturday, and you don't realize that tree's dumping. And you just wasted a hunt,
exactly. Which brings me to the other thing I wanted to talk to you about, because I saw this post, and this can happen to people like whenever this happens continually, right? Like if you're a guy who can only hunt the weekend, and you feel like you're always behind, and you can't quite get on the deer you want to get on, or whatever the case is, right? Or maybe you've burned it so hard, so long at both ends, right? You start to get burned out, and I think a lot of people in hunting have a hard time. Everyone's got social media, right? And everyone wants to be like, I'm tough, and man, I can do it all day, and like whatever, whatever the adjective or accolade is, right? Like everyone is that, all those things all the time, right? And I think there's a part of I think what would help a lot of people out is to recognize, like, man, this thing doesn't have to burn white hot all the time for you to love it or be passionate about it. Like, it's okay that sometimes it takes a back seat for a couple of days, a month, or whatever the case is, right? Like, because you made a post and I saw this, and I told you before we started recording, it kind of hit me like a ton of bricks because I went through this 2 years ago, where I still love deer hunting.
Yep.
But I just wasn't. The season was coming up, and I just didn't have that, like, you know what I mean? Like, I just didn't, and I couldn't place what it was, you know. And I finally got some space away from it, and that's kind of what I realized was like, man, you know, whenever it doesn't burn as bright for me anymore, that's when I know I need to kind of step away and give it some space, not press harder. It's like golf. Like, you don't get better at golf by like trying harder. You get better at golf by like relaxing.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not a good golfer either, but but like, talk to me a little bit about that, because it sounded like you went through the same type of thing where you were like, you know, I don't want to say you were burned out, but you didn't have the same spark you used to, and like, how did you get it back?
So, yeah, it happened last year, mid-October. I'm hunting. I hunted 3 days. I hunted these 3 days, 15th. I always like to be in the woods the 15th and 16th. I don't know. Those days are just magical. Yeah. I don't know why, but it's like everything. If you're going to kill something, a lot of times it's those 2 days. But so I was out there. I saw 12 or 13 bucks within 3 sits. And I didn't even care. You know what I mean? It was just like, I'm seeing every buck in the marsh. Boom, boom, boom. But I never seen that, you know, I was after one of the big ones. But it was just, I was just numb, you know. I mean, and anyone else would be like, hey, there's a 140 or there's this, you know, and just a parade of bucks.
It's a great day by any standard.
One of the best days I've ever seen bucks, but I'm just like, I didn't care. And I went out there maybe the following evening or whatever, and I had a decent buck come by, and I shot that. And it was just, you know, just kind of emotionless, you know. And I don't know what it was, and got into a little funk there or whatever, and then I kind of got back to a little more basic stuff. I guess you get kind of numb watching, you know, social media and stuff. You just get numb to it. You're like, what are you doing it for? You know, why am I posting or any of that kind of stuff? But I finally got out of it. You know, it took a couple weeks, and I ended up going back to North Dakota, and then, you know, took my kid out hunting once back behind the house here, and it, you know, just reinvigorated it. So and now it's we're going.
It's back on.
We're going. Yeah.
What do you think? Like, what was it that you think changed your perspective, or what do you think like allowed you to kind of like refine the? I don't want to say the interest, but like because you always had an interest. It wasn't like the interest went away. It was just like that overdrive. And it's really what it takes to like to be successful as you have been. It has to be that.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't quit. You may lose the spark, and you still may shoot deer, and you know, but it's just kind of like it's there's no meaning, you know.
Right.
There's just no meaning behind it. I don't know what, you know, why it came about exactly, but you know, I've been there before where you got ebbs and flows, you know, you just whatever it is. Yeah. But I've always just kind of pushed through it, you know, and then after that, you know, I was going out to North Dakota. I'm kind of a solo hunter. I don't hunt with anybody.
So even when similar. Yeah.
Even when I go out of state, it's all by myself in a tent, whatever. And it's, you know, just, it's kind of I don't know. It's kind of like church, you know. You're kind of out
peaceful,
there.
Man.
It's peaceful, you know.
Yeah.
Meditative. Yeah. So going back to North Dakota, that really helped. You know, I was still in kind of a funk, and I went back out there, you know, to fill my tag. And it was a beautiful morning, and I went out there for 4 days, and had a decent buck come by me, but I didn't have a shot at that or nothing, but had some does coming into me, and it was just beautiful, just quiet, peaceful. They're all filtering just like they should. And I'm like, I'm gonna shoot that doe, you know. And so I shot the doe, and that was awesome, you know. Yeah. And I actually had people like, why are you buying a tag to go shoot a doe, you know? And I'm like, you don't understand, you know. I've been doing it for so long. It's, you know, it felt right. I can't explain it.
Yeah. So, it's sometimes, like, it's interesting to hear you say that you hunt a lot by yourself. I hunt a lot by myself too.
Yeah.
And I kind of prefer it. There's really one or two people that I hunt with. My buddy Chad, like he and I will go out to the Midwest together some, and then our buddy Cameron will come with us once in a while.
Okay.
But predominantly, like the past several years, Chad and I's like travel schedule hasn't synced up for a couple of different reasons. Like he was able to draw Iowa the one year, and et cetera, et cetera. So it was like we were kind of off schedule for a couple of years. Supposed to hunt together this year. So for a bunch of years here in the recent past, it's like I've been doing everything solo. I like it because, like you were saying, I get a real good sense of like why I do things when I'm by myself. It's that old saying of like having the talk with the man in the mirror, right? Yeah. It's a lot of times hard to do when you're around. At least I have a hard time doing it when I'm around people, right? Whenever, because you got people always tugging at you, right? It's like you got your family who you love, but like they need stuff from you, right? And then you have friends maybe that they need, not that they need, but like they want to have some time with you, right? And then you have work that they want time from you. And then it's just when I can finally just get away and like go like, okay, I have to be these different not types of person and not a completely different person, but I have to be a different version of me for all these different types of people.
Yep.
Right. And sometimes I think when you do that, you lose like, who am I for me? You know what I mean? And like, when do I get a chance to like, water that seed, you know? And to me, it's like going out and being able to hunt by myself lets me do that. Same thing I get to do in jiu-jitsu, right? Yeah. And a lot of what it is, it's like, it's just me having time for me again, whether it's hunting or doing jiu-jitsu or whatever the case is.
And maybe when you're going to another state or by yourself, it's just, that's all you got to focus on then is hunting, right? Yeah. Even when I'm home here,
it's hard.
Like, I got to get home. I got to do this. I got to do that, or I'm scouting, like I'm getting up at 4 a.m. to go scouting and then get home at 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning. That way I got the rest of the day and I'm not putting, otherwise I'd be out there all day long. Maybe I'm scouting in the middle of the night or, it's just trying to, but when you're out, by yourself out west or Midwest and all you got to do is hunt. It's just,
it's different.
It's different.
Yeah.
You can get if that's all you're focused on, it's different.
You feel the tug of those obligations whenever you're home. Because even whenever I was, living out of the trailer last year, it was a couple hours from my house. So it wasn't like they were around the corner or anything like that. But even then, it's like I still felt the tug of like,
guilty, maybe a little
because like even if I was like I had a day of rain or something like that, it's like I even though it's like I could hunt the morning and then I could hunt the evening even though it's going to rain, I could still go out. But I was like, but man, I could drive home because it is going to rain. I could just drive home and spend the night at home at least one night and then come back the next day and then hunt and then start hunting again. And so I would do that because it's like miss my girls, want to see my wife, my daughter, right? And it's like I want to be around them as much as I can, right? It's like so you have that internal struggle, but like whenever I'm out in the Midwest somewhere and I'm like 24 hours from my house, I'm like, well, I ain't coming back till I'm done. Like so,
I'm hunting and I'm focused. Yeah, I mean, and it doesn't take long to get on something with that mindset out there. When you're hunting, it's when you can just focus.
It's crazy what you can do when your mind is calibrated to like a specific thing. It's you have way more power and capability, or people have way more power and capability than they give themselves credit for. What they don't often get is the latitude to be focused on a thing at one time. And
I know I'm not the best at family time or being the best husband or father, because I really prioritize my scouting probably way too much, I realize that, but it gets to a point where if I'm not out in the woods, I get agitated. I'm saying yes. I'm just like I need to be out there. I need to go scout. I need to do
I'm right there right now actually. This is where I'm at because this I've talked about. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I say you want to go find one of those big ones in PA now.
Well, where I've been is and I've mentioned this on the podcast a couple times is this off season is a little different for me, where the place that I like to hunt, that big woods piece, like the weather there is really bad all winter long. It doesn't get uncovered. Like they don't maintain any of the roads in and out there and stuff like that. So like once the snow hits it, and we had a lot of snow this year, it's basically like snowmobile access only at that point. And then to usually have to wait till about beginning of April until you can actually reasonably get back to all the spots, right? You might be able to get to a couple spots, but like you're still going to have like, and it's not the snow that you can scout in. It's like it has melted off enough, but then refroze and melted and refroze. So even like if you're trying to side hill anything or check out, like there's nothing there, Yep. And so you really have to kind of wait until you hit that beginning of April time frame to where it's like, all right, everything's going to be melted. The roads are going to be accessible, good to go. And then I just happen to have family obligations basically, all week, like every weekend since the beginning of since the beginning of April. And then another one this coming weekend. So it's like the past 6 weeks, it's like I've had no availability to get out, right? And so I'm going to be starting all of my work there like in 2 weeks, essentially, right? And then also it's like, you throw in the added addition of like my daughter's a junior and she's got college visits and stuff like that. It's like she has a social calendar now too. So it's like her social calendar is partially mine, And so... But I was like, the interesting thing is like you just have to figure out a way to work around it, And so what I do now is that my scouting is way more focused. And sometimes I can only get out for 2 or 3 hours, and I get out, and it's like I'm going to go to this spot, and I'm going to investigate this, and I have to put the blinders on. There's no more. I don't have the freedom to go. Oh, what's over that hill? You know what I mean? And just like go. And I used to do a lot of that, But now it's like I think this is going to be good. Let me go look at this. And I'm going to spend my time here, and that's kind of what I have to do.
You can cover a lot of ground, too, by just pick out 2 or 3 key features in that property.
Yeah.
Don't, just say, if there's a big buck, he's going to leave sign here, here, or here.
Yeah.
And that's it. And go to those spots.
Yeah.
And if there's no sign, pull it and go to,
Yep.
And you can cover a lot of territory that way.
Yep. And that's basically where I'm at now. Is like I don't have the freedom to like volume scout anymore right now, right? It's like it's got to be targeted, and I got to be able to get in and out in anywhere from 2 to 4 hours and get done what I need to get done. But what I find is like whenever I do that, I'm actually way better.
Yeah.
For some reason, because like I feel like then I have structure and I'm way more focused and disciplined than if I'm going to go scout for the day and I'm just going to walk. And then it's like I come back and I'm like, I didn't find shit. You know what I mean?
Maybe because you're not overthinking it, maybe.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
It's like, you can get on deer a lot quicker maybe when you're going to another state because you're just not overthinking it. You're looking for just this, or this. And okay.
Mm-hmm.
Engineer versus service tech.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Going back to the beginning. I think the other thing is just it makes me recalibrate my expectations too a little bit, right? For like the upcoming season where I'm like, you know what? Because I'm limited, I'm probably going to have to rely on what I've learned in the past, like locally, what I know, right, from the past several years of hunting it, and stuff. And then, what I know in the big woods piece, it's like I'm going to have, like, I'm probably not going to hunt that unless I have a deer I want to hunt because it's 2.5 hours away and I didn't get to spend a whole lot of time there this off season. So it's like, unless I have something really interesting, it's like I'm probably going to take this year as like another year just to kind of learn more about it, and hunt it some when I can get up there and mainly scout it during the season, and then maybe have some targeted hunts around where I live because I just know historically I know more about the spots, about the areas.
And I bet you there's some giants right where you live. You know what I mean? I bet you there's some.
I've been able to find a few like here and there. My buddy Greg Litzinger right now, if you heard me, he would punch me in the face because he's like, he's always like every year he's like, dude, he's like, I don't know where you're hanging your cameras or what you're doing. He's like, but every year he's like, every freaking year he's like, I would just send him like pictures of like, hey, look at this big deer. He's like, I just want to punch you in the face. But speaking of, man, so I don't get punched in the face, and you don't get punched either from the family. I'm gonna be sensitive to your time and let you get going. Appreciate you coming on. Before I let you get out of here, though, let people know where they can follow along with you. They can, see what you got going on during the season if you're posting anything or anything like that.
Yeah, I do everything on Instagram, shadow_pursuits, and once it gets a little closer here, I'll, starting June, I'll be posting a lot of stuff as far as more scouting videos and stuff that, it's just shorts on there I put on there. But,
Right.
Yeah, that's where you can find me on there.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on, dude. You have an open invite anytime you want to come on. I really enjoyed the conversation. You're salt of the earth people, a hell of a hunter, and just the type of people I like to associate myself with and stay close to. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate having me on. And yeah, anytime you want to talk about a subject or something, let me know. That'd be fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
So.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening. And if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And hell, while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there too. I'd be super appreciative if you do those couple things for me. And before I shut this thing down, I need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible: Tacticam, Osseo Gear, Hawk Optics, Tethered, Face Off E-Bikes, and Lathrop & Sons Boot Company. And until next time, we'll see y'all.